When they came to me and asked me to introduce the guest speaker, I thought to myself, I've never really introduced a man that I didn't know. So when I got here, I went to him and said, look, I saw your bio, tell me about you. Tell me what you do, what you did. And this young man looked me in the eye and he talked for 15 minutes. And I'm telling you, he has a way with words. But what really excited me was when they called the first trailblazer up. And when she got up, I thought to myself, she's gonna have trouble on these steps. And I got up, he got up, and a young man tapped me on the back and said, I got this, Mr. Atkins. And this was one of our students that did that. So when we think about trailblazers, we gotta think about them little young guys that got smoke coming off the heels of their shoes too, because they make a difference. And this guy kind of touched my heart a little bit because he's a good-hearted man. And we spoke about what he did. Now you have his bio in front of you, you can read that. I won't insult your intelligence, but I'm just gonna pick out and highlight a couple things. Acclaimed orator, engineer, entrepreneur, political strategist, public writer. And you think about those titles, and then you think about his business at the age of 16, starting his business. Earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Auburn University. You think about, and then when I saw Alabama, I'm saying, man, all these great people come from Alabama. I think even Miss Holloway came from Alabama. So it's gotta be a great place. The student organizations to government boards, nonprofit and business groups, his leadership experience. You look at all those things, I ask myself, Rich, why are you up here talking? Let this guy talk. So without further ado, join me in a round of applause for Kel Jackson.
Wow. You know, that's tough to follow. Thank you, Richard, for that introduction. Well, let me correct myself. Thank you, Command Sergeant Major Atkins, for that introduction. You know, I would be remiss not to acknowledge our distinguished guests in the room. I want to thank the superintendent for being here, the assistant principals, faculty, and men, Jametta, wherever you are. She's instrumental in putting this together. I think they all deserve a round of applause. I also want to mention the honorees. You know, I'm sitting here watching them and I was very, very inspired. So wherever all of you are, thank you for what you've done. You've inspired me even more today than I was when I showed up in Trenton yesterday. So I'm happy to be here. You all have joined the ranks of people like William Still and Paul Ropes and New Jersey folks that make this country what it is today. So I appreciate you. So, I mean, I'm here today and all I want to talk about are three basic things: where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. You know, they talk about me being from Birmingham, and Birmingham is one of the first things I think about when you tell me about Black history. I come from an impoverished part of this city, and we've seen more than our fair share of racial violence. If you think about it, we are the Birmingham from which Martin Luther King Jr. wrote his letter from jail. We are the city where the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed and 4 little girls died. You know, in fact, I don't know if a lot of folks know this, the bombing and the violence got so bad that in the 60s, we were known as Bombingham. I can even think of a man my dad knew well. I knew him as Mr. Buck. Now, during the Civil Rights era, Mr. Buck was very active in the community, and one day, he was minding his own business and he found a bomb. ticking, ready to go off and kill people. Well, instead of doing what I think a lot of us would reasonably do, screaming, running away, telling everybody else to duck for cover, he picked this bomb up with his own 2 hands, and he carefully carried it into the middle of the street. He kept everyone away, and when it exploded, no one was hurt. That's what Birmingham is to me, and that's what the beauty is of that place is there's so many stories like that. So many stories I know, so many other stories I don't know. But the more I think about black history, I obviously end up thinking about Africa. I think about how my ancestors were traded off into slavery, sometimes by slave traders, sometimes by people from competing tribes, taken to a slave fortress, sold for the highest bidder. And they pass through something like a gate of no return. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but it's basically a passage through the wall, and once you go through this passage, you're never coming back. I started researching the slave boats because, I'm an engineer by trade, and I discovered that they were designed to be just hospitable enough so that the cargo, not the people, the cargo could survive. And if you think about it, a slave back then, in 2014 dollars, a good slave was worth as much as $35,000. They weren't making the boats habitable to protect human dignity, to protect human life. With hundreds of slaves, they were protecting their investment. And when they arrived in the New World, we all know how the story went from there. But what amazes me every time I think about black history and how far my ancestors have come from when they first arrived on this continent today is the kind of progress we've made. I mean, think about it, you guys. We've gone from the slave house to the big house to the penthouse to the state house to the White House. And that kind of progress was just made possible by the civil rights generation in a lot of ways because they didn't have a lot of tools, they didn't have a lot of rights, but they made it happen. And the big way they did it is by marching. And I think they do deserve a round of applause right there. And when I think about marching, the interesting thing about marching is it's both triumph and terror. I think about the triumph of the March on Washington. When you've got thousands and thousands of people on the National Mall, you can't even see the ground because there's so many people there. I also think of the terror of a day like Bloody Sunday, when the march from Selma to Montgomery was met by police who brutally and savagely beat peaceful protesters. But all they could do was march. All they could do was march. And it's amazing to me what they accomplished with the little tools they had. Marching is just a fascinating thing to me because it allows so many people to move together as one, to be united, to be efficient, and to get what they're going. But the more I thought about marching, the more I realized that when you march a little bit, you get stronger. And the stronger you get, the more you can march. And the more you march, you get a little faster until one day you're able to stop marching and start running. Running is a funny thing. It takes more effort, it's more tiring, but if you gotta get somewhere quick, and you got nothing but your own 2 feet to get you there, there is no faster way to get there but running. So my message to you, and I can't really say your generation because I feel like I'm a part of it, so my message to my generation is we can't march, we've gotta run. The burden is on our generation to carry us forward. And I think about how some might say that in modern day America, we're past race now and we're beyond race issues. Well, to someone who says we've got no more work to do in the area of race relations, I just say, why don't you go ask the family of Trayvon Martin if the journey is complete? Why don't you ask the family of Jordan Davis if the journey is complete? The journey is not complete, and we've got work to do. When innocent kids are cut down in the streets for no reason but suspicion, we've got work to do. When innocent kids are cut down in the streets by other kids that look like them, we've got work to do. When innocent kids of any color can't get the education they deserve because they were born poor, we've got work to do. We can't be satisfied. We can't be content. We must be tireless. We must be vigilant. I've said it before. I'll say it again. There is too much work to do. And in 2014, marching won't get us there. We've got to run. And you know, I mean that literally. I'm seeing congressmen, United States senators in the audience tonight. I could be in the room with the future president of the United States, but you won't get there if you do not literally run for the office. Too much is at stake. We can't let this moment pass by us. We must run. We must run for those who came before us and could only dream of the opportunities we have today. To the supporters of civil rights, who wanted nothing more but unity across all the races. For the victims of racial violence who breathed their last breath, desperately hoping, praying for a better tomorrow. We've got to run for the Trayvon Martins, for the Jordan Davises, and all the thousands of other young lives that are cut down, rocking communities and destroying families. We must run for the ones who will come after us. For our children, our grandchildren, we owe them a better world than the one we found. We owe them safer communities, and we owe them a more perfect union. So I'm not going to be long tonight, guys. I just want to close with this one thing, because there's something I really want to remind you of. And to be honest with you, New Jersey, I came all the way from Birmingham, Alabama, just to tell you that in 2014, it is not enough to march. Marching is what got us here. Thank God for those who march, but we've got even more tools at our disposal today. We've got even more resources at our disposal today. We have no excuse. There is no reason not to. In 2014 and beyond, it is not enough to march. We must run. Because if we don't, who will? If we don't stand up for our communities, who will? If we don't fight for our neighbors, who will? Listen, somebody's got to be your mayor. Why not you? Somebody's got to be your state senator. Why not you? Somebody's got to be your governor. Why not you? This is our duty. This is the burden of our generation. This is our torch to carry. This is our legacy to leave behind. Folks, we have got to do more than march. We've got to run, and we've got to win. That's how we change things. That's how we heal our community. That's how we earn a seat at the table. And you know what? I'll be right there with you, because this nation of ours only works when we work together. It is time for our generation to rise up. It is time for our generation to continue the struggle. It is time for our generation to run. Thank you, guys. God bless you. God bless New Jersey. God bless these United States. Thank you, guys.